Good morning. Great. Well, thank you all for being here for our November 21st, 2019 Indiana Housing Community Development Authority meeting, board meeting. And council, is there a quorum?
Here you do have a quorum.
Thank you. Thank you. Our first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the October 24th, 2019 board meeting. Are there any additions, corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and approved, moved and seconded for approval. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Oh, yes, and so before we start into our actual agenda, if we can introduce ourselves to those that are perhaps viewing us live streaming, and we'll start with you, Mark, if that's okay.
No problem. Thank you very much. Mark Pascarella, the Director of Debt Management for the IFA. I'm actually the designee for the Public Finance Director, Dan Hughey.
Kelly Mitchell, State Treasurer.
Laura Brown, Special Counsel for Lieutenant Governor Crouch.
Suzanne Crouch, Lieutenant Governor.
Jacob Seid, Executive Director at IHCDA.
I'm Mike Schallmeyer, citizen member, Condi Sovereign Con, Evansville, Indiana.
June Lickett, citizen member. Sheena Robinson, IHCDA paralegal and the board secretary.
Wonderful. Please welcome Alan Rakowski to present the 2020 Low-Income Housing Tax Credits Recommendation. Welcome, Alan.
Good morning, thank you. I will have a PowerPoint presentation behind you here for this part of the board meeting. It's also in your board packet if you want to follow along.
Oh, okay, so we can follow on our packet.
Okay.
So again, good morning. My name is Alan Rakowski. I'm the Rental Housing Tax Credit Manager here today to present our annual Rental Housing Tax Credit Round Awards for the 2020 Tax Credit Round. Bear with me here as I try to move the first. There we go. So in beginning, I thought we would start just by giving an overview of how many tax credits we have available. So on the 2020 Indiana tax credit ceiling, the estimated 2020 per capita credits is about 18.8 million, and that's based on population of Indiana times a multiplier of 2.81. The remaining 2019 per capita credits is at 2.7 million. I do want to note that of that 2.7 million, 2.125 million will be going to projects that are in the 2019 general set-aside, which is called Moving Forward RD. We'll actually be bringing those to you next month for recommendations. So after we take out those tax credits, the remaining 2019 credits is rolled into 2020. So the total amount we have available for 2020 is $19,394,402 for the tax credit round in 2020. So a round summary, we received 43 applications. These applications came to us on July 29th. The total amount of credits requested is $44,059,595. We had $1.6 million in home requested. Development fund request was at $6 million total. In housing trust fund request, that totaled $2.3 million. A round summary. Today, we will be recommending 18 applications for funding for tax credits. The total tax credit recommendation will be $17,461,899. The amount of home funds we're recommending is $1.2 million. Development fund, $1.5 million. In the housing trust fund, $1.2 million. And those credits that aren't being allocated today will be used for the 2020 general set-aside that's been designated for a program called Moving Forward 2020. So those credits will be reserved next year and brought to the board next year for that allocation. Just an overview of the process. As I'm sure you know, there's a lot of steps to get to where we are today. Really, they begin at the conclusion of the last tax credit round in 2019. We had debriefs at the end of the year, met with tax credit developers, those that didn't get awards, which we customarily do, to discuss their application, help them determine if they would like to reapply. Then also, which is down on the slide, between spring and between June of 2019, we released a new QAP. So once we had those one-on-one meetings with developers. We worked on the 2020, 2021 QAP, had 2 drafts, and released that in March of 2019. So at that point, the development community had a QAP available to work on to see what, if their projects were good fits and if they were going to apply this year. So in June of 2019, June of this year is when we required what's called a Form C, which is a notice of intent. It gives IHCDA an idea of how many applications will be coming in. Also, it provides project information to allow us, as the staff, to go and do site visits, to look at the sites, make sure we understand where they are, what's around them. They also submit capital needs assessments for rehab projects. Those are submitted to us, or were submitted to us in June. That gives our inspector time during the months of June and July to go out and review the CNAs and just make sure that what's in the CNA is consistent with what he sees during the inspection. So the applications were due July 29th. Once they came in, we began our review process, beginning in end of July, where we began to go through the applications, assign application reviewers, and then all the way up to today, where we make the recommendations. But during that 3.5 month period, what we're doing is a threshold review, underwriting review, market study, cost analysis, scoring, just making sure that we follow the procedures in our QAP and get to a point where we have a list of projects to recommend. In August, we also issued a memo to applicants, so there's kind of a quiet period after they submit their application to us for about 2 months. The memo provided them with key dates when they can expect to hear from us, so they can watch for letters and begin to address any questions we might have in their application. Also in August, we notified the highest elected official in the community, each community that received, for which we received an application, to let them know that the project was submitted and to let them know when we'd be making recommendations on those projects. September 24th, we issued our technical correction letters. So this is once we complete our threshold review, we send letters to each project if we identify anything that's considered a technical correction that doesn't meet our QAP requirement, or clarifications that we have that we just want additional information on. They then have 2 weeks to respond to that and bring their applications within our threshold guidelines. And then the final step regarding correspondence is our preliminary score sheets. So when the application is submitted, they submit a self-score, and then we compare that. We provide what we see as the score of the project after doing a review. We issue those score sheets, issued those on October 18th. We've done this now for a good number of years. It allows the developers to see how we're ranking, how we're scoring their project. It allows them to comment, to provide written comments if they feel as if maybe we missed something or misinterpreted something. It's a chance for there to be a dialogue to make sure that when we finalize our scores, they've at least seen where they're ranking and have an opportunity to respond, just in case something, in case we missed something or they want to call to our attention. So once we have the preliminary score sheets and responses, we finalize the scores, and that gets to a point where we have a list of projects to recommend. But I do want to acknowledge that the review team, before I get into the recommendations, so you can see it's a pretty lengthy list of real estate staff that work on this process. So I just wanted to make sure that we recognize them. You know, we spend many hours in meetings, but also individually working through the applications. Everyone has their specific role that they're fulfilling to make sure that we get to a point where we have followed our process and have the best recommendations possible. So most of these names are probably familiar to you, but I just want to acknowledge and recognize to the board all the hard work that gets to the point where we are today. So with that, we'll start with the tax credit recommendations for 2020. The first recommendation is Burn Court. This project will be in Indianapolis, or actually is in Indianapolis, as it's a rehab deal. Scored 108. The tax credit amount is $669,919. It'll have 50 units. It's age restricted. The type of construction is rehab. Developer is John Bonner Community Center, and this project is being funded under our preservation set aside. Next project is Canal Village. Canal Village will be located in Indianapolis. This project actually was the highest scoring project in the round. It scored 114. The tax credit amount is $978,404. It will have 37 units, scattered site, single-family homes are part of the deal, as you can see from the image there. Family designation, it'll be new construction, and the developer is BWI LLC, and then this project is being funded out of the large city set aside. Next is Crossroads Village. This project will be in Seymour. It's scored a 105.5. The tax credit amount is 1.2 million. 64 units will be built. This will be age restricted. Type of construction is new construction. Jonesboro Investments Corporation is a developer with a not-for-profit partner, Thrive Alliance, and this project is being funded out of the not-for-profit set-aside. Next is Enterprise Point. This project, it will be in Angola. It scored a 108.5. The tax credit amount is 780,000. The total units will be 50 with a family designation. It'll be new construction. This project is being developed by Brightpoint, and Enterprise Point is being funded out of the rural set-aside. Next is Erie Point. This project will be in Evansville. It scored 104. Tax credit amount is 852,000. It'll have 500,000 in development fund, 38 total units. It'll have, it has a family and supportive housing designation. This development will have projects that meet the community integration set-aside, community integration units as part of it. It'll be new construction, and the developer is Advantix Development Corporation, and Erie Point is being funded out of the community integration set-aside. Evansville Townhomes is the next project. This also will be in Evansville. Scored a 102.06. Tax credit amount is 669.83. It's requesting 500,000 development fund, 60 total units, family designation. It'll be rehab of single-family homes that's currently in the Housing Authority's portfolio. Developer is Advantix Development Corporation, and Evansville Townhomes is being funded out of the preservation set-aside. Governor Park will be a deal in Ellettsville, scored 104. The tax credit amount is $1,060,787. It'll have 90 units. It'll have an age restriction and also supportive housing, so it'll have community integration units as part of it. New construction, the developer is Allied Real Estate Partners, LLC, and this project is being funded out of the rural set-aside. Next is Harper's Crossing. This project will be in Plainfield. It's scored a 104.25, 1.2 million in credits, 60 units proposed. It has a family, will have a family designation, new construction. Woda Cooper Development is the developer, and Harper's Crossing is being funded out of the workforce housing set-aside. Haven Homes is the next project. This one is also in Plainfield. It's scored a 105.25. It'll is requesting 1.2 million in credits, housing trust fund amount of 400,000, 52 units. It's going to be family and supportive housing. So this is a project that has doing integrated supportive housing that went through our institute. New construction. The developer is Real America Development LLC, and this project is also being funded through the workforce housing set-aside. Historic Gallatin Square is a project in Marion. Scored a 109.5. The tax credit request is just under 1.1 million. The total unit count will be 42. It will be age restricted. It's a rehab of some historic buildings in Marion. The developer is McKinley Development, LLC, and Historic Gallatin is being funded out of the small city set-aside. Sorry about this, bear with me. There we go. Oops, today. Okay, so next one is Katy Jean Cove. This project will be in New Haven. It's scored a 94.5. Tax credit amount, 800,000. It'll have 50 units, age restricted. This will be new construction. The developer is Keller Development Incorporated. And Katy Jean Cove is the project the one project being funded out of our Stellar Community set-aside. Okay. Sorry for the suspense. I know I'm not meaning to stall any slides, but it's probably building suspense. Memorial Lofts is the next one. This one will be in Evansville. Scored a 112.5. Tax credit request is 825,000. 50 units, family designation, it'll be new construction. Memorial Community Development Corporation will be the developer, and Memorial Lofts is also being funded out of the large city set aside. Near West Village is our next project. This would be a deal, or is a deal in Indianapolis. It's a resyndication of a previous tax credit deal in the early 90s. It scored a 107.87, 1 million in tax credits is the request. It'll have 62 units, family designation, primarily rehab, but does have some new construction. McKinley Development LLC will be the developer, and this one is being funded out of the preservation set aside. Next is Olive Grove Townhomes. This project will be in New Albany, scored 108, 1.2 million in credits, 600,000 home requested, 55 units with a family designation. It'll be new construction, and the developer is New Hope Development Services Incorporated, and Olive Grove is being funded out of the small city set aside. Okay, this is Pando Aspen Grove of Community Heights. This project will be in Indianapolis. Scored a 99 total. Tax credit request is 842,370. Housing Trust Fund request is 800,000. It'll have 30 units, designated supportive housing, so it went through our institute and is being funded through the Housing First Set Aside. It's new construction, and TWG Development LLC will be the developer of this project. Proctor Place, it will be in Indianapolis. It scored a 111.5. The tax credit amount is $1,026,500. 61 total units. It'll have a family, and it also has supportive housing, so this is an integrated supportive housing deal that went through the institute. It'll be new construction. Wooded Cooper Development Incorporated is the developer on this, and Proctor Place is being funded through the not-for-profit set aside. Okay, so we're down to the last two. Next one is South Point Village. This project will be in Fishers. It scored 102, 1.2 million in credits is the request. It'll have 62 units, family designations, and also will have community integration units. The type of construction is new construction. The developer is Real America Development LLC. And this project is being funded out of the community integration set aside. And the final one is Townhomes on Main in Rockville. This project scored a 101.5, has a tax credit request of $860,000. The home amount requested is $600,000. Development fund request is $500,000. It'll have 40 units. Family designation, it'll be new construction. And the developer is New Hope Development Services Incorporated. And this project is being funded out of the rural set aside. So there you have our 18 recommended projects. We have a map on here to show the distribution around the state. Probably what might be helpful is if we, maybe in the future, we include a map that shows where we had applications, but this is where it's because we're somewhat limited based on where they come into. But I think this is a good distribution, and it shows you where we are in our 2020 round as far as tax credit awards. So with that, those are the recommendations for credits, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions?
Madam Chair, one question as it relates just to the gross volume of applications and some comparisons as it relates to years past, and also include the quality of those.
Yeah, so we had fewer applications in this round. We had 43, which was down. I think, last year we had 51, and we were typically in the low 50s. I think it's the lowest total we've had probably in 9 or 10 years. We're not entirely sure why. Sometimes when you have a new QAP, the first year of the 2-year QAP, more projects may kind of wait it out, see how it goes. We know some projects, because of the timing of the QAP, it's a pretty quick turnaround, being released in March, that they may not quite be ready yet. So I think we're confident that the number will increase in year 2, but it was down a little bit. And I would say the quality of the applications continues to be very strong. We did have 5 or 6 projects that didn't meet threshold, for various reasons, but for the most part, if we had twice as many credits, we could recommend basically 38 deals today, which I think is a real testament to the development community. But overall, I mean, the number's down a little bit, but I think the quality is as high as it's ever been.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Alan, I think we're ready for your recommendation.
Staff respectfully requests that the board approve the following resolution. Resolve that the board approve the following: an aggregate award of low-income housing tax credits in the amount of $17,461,899, an aggregate award of development fund in the amount of $1.5 million, an aggregate award of home funds in the amount of $1.2 million, and an aggregate award of housing trust fund in the amount of $1.2 million to the 18 developments listed in Table A, as more particularly identified in the development summary sheets as recommended by staff.
We have a resolution before us. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for approval. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Alan.
Okay, thank you.
Please welcome Jeff Zangolowitz to discuss a project-based voucher award for permanent supportive housing.
Good morning, Board. I'm bringing two awards to you today. I'm going to start with the Project-Based Voucher Award for Permanent Supportive Housing. This is for a project that was just awarded tax credits by Allen, Haven Homes in Hendricks County. A little bit about our process. Several years ago, we made efforts to streamline the process with the tax credit application process. We just make a supplemental application now with the tax credit application, just to cut down on the amount of information duplicative information that we're asking from developers. So a team, some of my staff and myself, reviewed that supplemental application and determined that this was a strong project. It had qualified for the project-based vouchers by previously going through the Indiana Permanent Supportive Housing Institute. The main goal of which the Institute is to increase the supply of permanent supportive housing in Indiana. This project has a target population of chronically homeless individuals, and will also target families that have encountered domestic violence situations. I am bringing, this project is being recommended for 13 total vouchers, 4 of which will be in 1-bedroom units, 5 of which will be in 2-bedroom units, and 4 of which will be in 3-bedroom units. That is a little bit larger unit size than we normally have with our voucher awards, so I'm excited to have some larger units for families experiencing chronic homelessness. Through the lifetime of the award, which will be a 15-year contract, we will be tracking the utilization of the awarded vouchers, the total number of chronically homeless households served by the vouchers, and overall compliance of the project. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Are there any questions for Jeff? I believe we're ready for your resolution, Jeff.
Staff respectfully requests the board approve the following resolution. Resolved that the board approve an award of 13 project-based vouchers to Real America Development LLC for Haven Homes of Hendricks County for a period of 15 years based on the annual fair market rents for Hendricks County as recommended by staff.
Board, we have a resolution before us. I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you, Jeff.
Right. I will move on to my second award today, which is our VASH Project-Based Voucher Award.
Thank you.
A little bit about the process. We released a RFP back in August for this VASH award. We had identified that in the northern area of the state, a lot of our chronically homeless veterans were being issued vouchers to find housing, but then we're having long search times before they were able to find available units to rent in. So we decided that it would be a good idea to project-base some awards so that we would have some housing stock available and designated for those veterans, so that once they were issued a voucher, they could quickly identify a unit and move in and get off the street. So through the RFP process, we had one applicant, South Bend Heritage Foundation, located in South Bend, and they have proposed project-basing 10 vouchers in existing properties in South Bend that they already operate, some of which are market rate and some of which are affordable projects. So the breakdown of the vouchers is listed in Table A. There will be 2 vouchers going in historic Rushton Senior Apartments, 6 going in Robertson Senior Apartments, and 2 going in Gemini Apartments. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Jeff? Entertain a resolution.
Staff respectfully requests the board approve the following resolution. Resolved that the board approve an award of 10 project-based vouchers to South Bend Heritage Foundation for a period of 15 years based on annual fair market rent for St. Joseph County as recommended by staff.
Board, we have a resolution before us. I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I will move, and being someone that's worked with South Bend Heritage Foundation, great group, so. wanted to note that.
Yeah, we're excited for this partnership.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Thank you,
Motion
Board.
passes. Thank you, Jeff. And please welcome Rich Harcourt to discuss the issuance of the 2020 Series A Single-Family Mortgage Revenue Bonds.
Good morning, Board. I'm here to seek your approval to issue 2020 Series A Single-Family Mortgage Revenue Bonds. As you all know, a significant portion of our business is helping first and second-time home buyers into homes with below-market first mortgage loans. And for first-time home buyers, we actually purchase those loans originated by lenders across the state, and we put them in a bond indenture. And we fund those loans by issuing tax-exempt debt against them. And so that's what this is. This is yet another tax-exempt issuance. We like to issue 2 to 3 times a year tied to volume. We typically issue smaller amounts, and we try to issue as close as we can to the prevailing mortgage rate, so we don't take interest rate risks. So this resolution contemplates allowing us to issue up to $80 million. Probably will be 60, maybe 70, but we like to have a little bit more cushion, particularly going into the spring and given where interest rates are today. As you know, we are allowed by the IRS to earn a spread between the mortgage loans that we put in the resolution and our financing of 112 basis points. And out of that spread, of course, we have to finance the bond closing costs as well as our down payment assistance. We really do like to issue fixed rate debt to match up with the fixed rate loans that we are issuing. And so in order to achieve full spread, at least in the last 3 issues, we've provided some over collateralization. We've reached into the equity of the bond indenture, and we've provided some additional mortgages that are not obligated to a tranche and provided some additional equity into that issuance so that we achieve full spread out of the gate. And we would anticipate doing that again in this issue. We would anticipate needing $10 million of collateral equity in the bond indenture to subsidize the offering, bring the rate down. This resolution also contemplates the opportunity to do some variable rate debt. And the reason to do variable rate debt is to drive down the cost of the issuance. We don't anticipate doing that this time. We do like to have the flexibility of it depending upon rates and the marketplace goes. We introduced the concept just so you know there's a possibility of that, and that at some point in time as the yield curve and rates change, we may be back asking for some variable rate. If we did that, we would do it at a very small percentage of the issue, maybe 25%, and we would fix or swap most of that at a lower rate. But again, I anticipate this being a straight fixed rate issue with some over collateralization. Also important to note is this is non-recourse. This is not an obligation of IHCDA. This is an obligation of the bond indenture. So with that, I would take any questions that the board might have around that.
Any questions for Rich?
I'll just make a couple comments. Rich and I have spoken about the structure, and this is the typical single-family funding mechanism that we utilize from the board. I do appreciate the fact that he did talk about, especially with the volatility today, the possibility of variable rate. And as he stated, I don't think he's going to actually do any variable rate for this issuance, but we want to at least make sure the board is aware that authorization is in there in case the markets, which they are volatile, change direction. He may reach into that variable rate bucket and derivative products to be able to secure the funding and the profit that IHCDA can get. So I appreciate, Rich, you bringing that up because, again, the last thing I want to have happen is they do some variable rate and all of a sudden the board says they were not aware of it. So chances are it's not going to be any variable rate, but I'm glad we at least mentioned it so the board is aware of it.
Yeah,
Nice to
truth.
have a mechanism.
And I appreciate that. And truth be told, if we were going to do a variable rate offering, if the modeling said we need to be doing it, we'd be having a conversation with Mark before we pulled the trigger on that, so.
Any other questions?
Question on provision 10 of what we're signing off on. It says interest rates not to exceed 9%. Explain that to me. That seems pretty high in this market.
Just a cap in there.
What do you anticipate?
On this issue?
Compared to your last issue?
Yeah, so mortgage rates today are in the 350 range. I would think overall this issue would go out the door before factoring in the cost of issuance and all that, somewhere in the 260, 270 range. We're allowed to make 112 bips, and that's where the over-collateralization would come in. But we'll have to see where it blends out. You know, you're issuing 30-year debt across the spectrum. It's a pretty flat yield curve right now.
So the 9% that's in there is just ice millers, just putting a large cushion in. I see that the rate then that will charge the mortgagors will be 2.25 capped.
Yeah.
It says there as well. So you're saying if we're 3.5, the subsidy would in effect be 1.5. It says here that mortgagors will be charged an amount not to exceed 2.25% in 10.
Yeah. Is Tyler, can you help me with that one?
Yeah, Tyler Kalash,
Can you come to the microphone?
The lenders themselves are allowed to charge a 1 point origination fee, and then that would be a cap on what the borrowers actually be liable for as well.
Okay, so
Uh,
that's
for
not an
mortgage
interest rate,
origination.
that's an origination fee?
Right, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any additional questions? Rich, I think we're ready for your resolution.
Staff respectfully requests the board approve the following resolution. Resolve that the board approve the issuance of the 2020 Series A bonds and related transactions pursuant to the attached resolution as recommended by staff.
Board, we have a resolution before us. I'll entertain a motion for approval.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you, board.
And please welcome Matt Rayburn to provide an anchor employer update.
Good morning, Board. My name is Matt Rayburn. I'm the Deputy Executive Director and Chief Real Estate Development Officer for IHCDA. And I'm here this morning just to give a quick program update on IHCDA's efforts this year to promote workforce housing throughout the state of Indiana. So there'll be no recommendation today. This is just a programmatic update. Before I jump into that, since I have the podium, I'd be remiss if I didn't just congratulate the 18 development teams that received tax credits earlier today. Congratulations from IHCDA, and we look forward to seeing the great developments that you'll be building over the coming years. So, as the board will remember, we have really, IHCDA took a step at the start of this year to see what it could do to support the development of workforce housing throughout the state of Indiana. And with the board's approval over the past several months, we have launched a number of initiatives. So this morning I wanted to do two things. I'm going to highlight two of those initiatives we've been working on this year, let you know what we have done over the last several months since the board approved these initiatives, and then give you kind of a sneak preview of where we're heading in 2020 with those programs and what the next steps are. So the first program I'll mention is our modular workforce housing demonstration program. This was a program IHCDA launched with board approval back in April. We released a request for qualifications on April 29th with applications due on June 24th. And the purpose of that program was really twofold. First and foremost, it was to build for sale houses throughout the state at price points that made sense for the workforce in the communities. But the second purpose of this really was to promote the use of modular housing as a way of building homes and studying that to say, does the modular construction build quality houses for quicker and being able to contain costs. So while the main goal of the program is the housing creation and the units that are going to be created to sell to workforce families, we'll also be continuing to study that program to say, is modular something we should continue to promote to build more home buyer homes throughout the state? So after the RFQ responses came in, we did select two teams, which the board was previously made aware of. We selected La Casa to do work in Elkhart and the Affordable Housing Corporation to do work in Marion. Those are both nonprofit organizations with a long history of doing work with IHCDA on a variety of programs. So since that time that we updated the board on the selection of those two teams, IHCDA, particularly Chris Nevels on our team, who's been leading this initiative, has been working very closely with those two teams. We have, since the last update, executed official award agreements with those teams, which included their anticipated timelines. So the teams are now currently working on their final plans, which includes final budgets, a pro forma for each home that they're building, and the exact addresses that they'll be submitting. So they are working on those financing plans, will be coming into us first quarter of 2020, and both of the developers anticipate they'll start building those modular homes in the second quarter of 2020. So that's where we are with that initiative right now. We'll probably be in a place where for the next few months we won't necessarily be updating the board much on this, because right now it's just the developers putting their final plans together. But next spring, early summer, we'll be in a position to give updates on where those teams are with the modular construction.
Matt?
Yeah.
Say this is successful beyond your wildest dreams, then what would the future hold?
That's a great question. So one thing that we could definitely do with this, so the funding that we used for this initial initiative, which was $500,000 grants to each of the two developers, was not necessarily a sustainable funding source that we would be able to keep doing more of this pilot program. However, it's something we would look at to see, do we have other sources to do a similar second round or third round of this program? But more importantly, I think if we're able to tell through this that the modular housing is really a way of building quality housing at a good pace with controlling costs, we'd be able to promote developers to use that modular housing through other programs we have. For example, the Home Investment Partnership Program, which already awards about $12 to $14 million of grants a year through IHCDA. There is a home buyer component of that where nonprofits can build homes to sell to income qualified families. So if this is a success, we could encourage developers to use that existing grant program we have, but to convert to doing modular housing as a way. So one thing we're looking at is, once we learn from this, do we start promoting the use of modular housing in other existing programs? But if it is wildly successful, we would also be looking to see, does the agency have other discretionary funding available at that time to do a second round?
Thank you.
Absolutely. The second initiative I'll give a quick update on today, and then I'll open it up for additional questions, is our Anchor Employer Workforce Housing Demonstration Program. This is a program that's got quite a bit of buzz lately. We released a request for proposals in June with applications due at the end of July. And the intent of this program was to challenge our anchor employers across the state. And we were really looking at an anchor employer being one of the top 10 employers in the city or county, to challenge them to come to the table and bring their expertise and their funding along with IHCDA to address the issue of workforce housing that they were seeing in their communities. So the whole idea of this program was a co-investment strategy. The investor will be, or the employer, pardon me, will be investing their own funds, as will IHCDA. As long as they invest at least $1 million, IHCDA will put in $1 million, although some employers may choose to invest more. And the way this is going to be set up, these funds that are created, mixing the employer and IHCDA's money, truly is an investment. So there's an expected return on that investment coming back to IHCDA, and we'll be establishing one-on-one kind of case-by-case program agreements where, depending on the risk and return on investment appetite of the employer, we'll be sharing that risk and that return on investment one-for-one with them. So we selected 4 teams, which the board was previously made aware of, but I'll quickly remind you. Impact CNC in Columbia City, IU Health looking to work in Indianapolis, Zimmer Biomet in Warsaw, and French Lick Resort in French Lick. So these 4 teams came together last week for a 2-day workshop that was hosted by IHCDA here on the 8th floor of this building, along with our program partner and consultant, Thomas P. Miller and Associates. And we put those teams through a 1.5-day workshop where they worked on, what is our vision for our community? What is the problem statement? What is the lack of housing in our community, and what problems is that causing for employers? And then they started to think about metrics. How would we measure success of this, since this is a demonstration program? And the teams really started thinking about ways they could track both the success of the housing as well as the impact on workforce development and their employees. So we're really challenging all 4 of these teams to track their success so that we can determine if this is a model that should be replicated. And then finally, of course, the team spent quite a bit of time just working on their project concept. What type of housing do they need to bring to their communities? At the end of that 1.5 days, we had a presentation open to community members, and I want to thank again Lieutenant Governor Crouch for coming and sharing her thoughts and asking great questions of the 4 teams. We had a great just kind of 1.5-hour brainstorming session with the teams. They gave small presentations, and then it turned into a community discussion on how we can support them moving forward. So the next steps for these 4 employers, as a follow-up to that workshop in mid-December, they'll be submitting to us a packet that kind of writes up the plans that they've come up with so far. So what is their vision and problem statement? What are the metrics they're planning to track through this program? And then dig deeper into their project concept. Once we have reviewed those, starting in January and running through December of next year, For at least all of next year, we'll do monthly check-in calls with these 4 employers to keep them moving forward on their workforce housing initiative. And in addition, we're going to do at least quarterly in-person meetings because the employers very clearly made us aware that they want to also use each other as a peer learning group and not just say we met one time in November 2019, but they want to keep meeting and sharing best practices and ideas with each other. So they have agreed, each employer, to host at least one meeting at their place of employment so that all employers will get to travel across the state and kind of tour each other's workspaces and learn more about the workforce challenges that they're commonly facing. So the next steps for the teams then, beyond those kind of sharing, is at this point, each team is kind of moving at their pace now. We're of course challenging them to move ahead as quickly as possible, but they'll be working one-on-one with IHCDA, primarily at first with Jake, our CFO Rich, and myself on, we're going to be sitting down with each of those teams in January and agreeing on what does this co-investment strategy look like to make sure there's a return on investment for both parties and terms that make sense for this investment. And then once they have those individualized work plans, they'll be submitting their final concept to IHCDA on here's how we're going to use the funds, and here is our timelines. And at that point, I'll be coming back on a one-by-one basis to the board for final approval. So as opposed to the modular where the board has already approved that $1 million to the 2 organizations, right now you have only approved us launching the program and selecting those 4 employers. But when we get to the point of having an investment strategy, I'll be coming back with individual board memos to approve that final investment of $1 million into each of the employers. So with that, I'll take any questions about any of our workforce housing initiatives.
And if this is successful beyond your wildest dreams, what would be next?
Yeah, I think very similar. We know that the teams are in a position where they're 4 employers who have a lot of clout in their communities, and I know they have shared with us that they're all anxious if this is successful, that they would like to do a couple things. One is I think they would be interested in doing advocacy work to the state to try to see if this is a program that could be launched to get state funding to continue this work, because the $4 million we're putting in is IHCDA revenue, which depending on our revenue each year is not necessarily sustainable to continue us taking money off of our books and putting it into this work. So there's no federal or state funding going into this. It's IHCDA revenue. So they are interested in going to the state with a proposal, if this is successful, to try to get state funding to continue this work. But they're also interested in, they're going to go out and talk to other employers in their communities and counties to try to get more employers to invest into these funds. And the goal is that they'll start to create sustainable funds that will continue to revolve and fund more housing in those communities. But even if that's successful, we know right now it's 4 communities, so we need to continue thinking about how to serve more areas of the state. And we'll do our best to think about what our role is in that work.
With the, what's kind of the long-term goal, perhaps, to be getting state funding?
Mm-hmm.
It might be beneficial to pull in some key legislators and start to really educate them on what you're doing, if you haven't already.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I know that our, knowing that next year won't be a budget session, that won't be again until 2021, I know really IHCDA, since we don't normally do much direct advocacy or lobbying, we're going to try to put that on the employers a lot to say, if this is an important initiative and you believe money needs to come to employers across the state, we're going to be challenging those employees to take that up and do some of that work. But IHCDA is certainly happy to do any education to anyone at the state level who wants to learn more about these programs.
Any other questions from the board?
Thank you very much. We'll keep you posted.
Thank you. And now we'll have an executive update by,
I'm not sure which microphone I'm supposed to talk into because I got like.
why don't we give you it all?
Yeah, sure. Just bring them all over.
Just like the media.
Yeah, what is going on there? All right, just want to thank you for your support with our Anchor Employer Initiative. Everything that we've been doing has really been trying to elevate the conversation and the awareness of the need for affordable housing, specifically for a lot of our working families and individuals, and kind of that missing middle piece there. So I know with your support and this board's support, none of that could happen. So I want to thank the board and you, Lieutenant Governor, for being open to some of the ideas that we've been presenting, and then to hear your comments about really being supportive of thinking about the state investing into some of these initiatives to support this work that's going on is really impactful for us as a team, because we're really trying to think outside the box and understand what kind of impact we can have within our communities when it comes to housing. So just appreciate the board's support, and Lieutenant Governor, appreciate your support as well for that, so. A couple other things here real quick. We did release our magazine, and I just want to point out a former board member, David Miller, is on the cover, and his great work that he has done in South Central Indiana, and just really acknowledging the work that he does with IHCDA and with other program partners at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, just the great work that they do down there. So just want to acknowledge that. One thing too that I'm really proud of with this magazine is you notice we don't get into a lot of the nuts and bolts and alphabet soup of affordable housing. We really just tell personal stories of what's going on and how we influence and how we impact people's lives and the communities that they live in. And so I say that because one of the features that we've been doing here is allowing some of our partners to write articles and to share those stories. So if you have, as I look out here with all of our development community and affordable housing advocates, if there are stories that you're aware of, we encourage you to share those with us so that we can ensure that we're including them in here. Just like the one where we have here with Sam, who was incarcerated and then was part of a reentry program at IHCDA and is now getting her degree, her certification, and is a welder, and is really living self-sufficiently now and making positive contributions back to her community. So those are the type of stories that we really like to highlight and we really like to share across our state. So just a request from our development community, if there's stories that you have that you would like for us to try to share those in the magazine. So, but our team does a great job in writing those articles, and they do that on their own time. That's just one of the things that the reason why our staff work at IHCDA is because of the mission, and to tell that mission, those stories is what we try to capture with the magazine. So, a couple other things here real quick. Our Moving Forward 2020 initiative, which is focused on integrating persons who have an intellectual disability that also can demonstrate that a development can take on a very complex or other challenge within a neighborhood or a community. We had those teams. There was, I think, 7 teams that presented on November 8th to IHCDA. We had a selection committee made up of non-IHCDA folks that represented the folks with intellectual disability community, and they evaluated those presentations and the responses that we received. And I was just really impressed with all 7 teams in the work that they're doing and the impact that they want to have and how we integrate persons with disabilities into our communities in a positive way. So with that, the selection committee has made a decision. I'm not going to announce it today because I want to as part of this is the general set aside, and this falls up under the executive director's discretion. I want to first be able to contact each of the 7 teams and thank them personally for their work and their leadership and what they do. After I do that next week, we will announce who those 2 teams are. So stay tuned for next week when we plan to announce the 2 teams. So we're really excited about the work that's going on here with this Moving Forward 2020. The other piece that I want to mention real quick, and I know Rich was up talking about our single family, we have not done an RFP with our loan servicing, and I think it's probably been 25, 30 years since we've done that. And we did release an RFP, and we had 3 responses to that RFP. Our existing servicer, which is U.S. Bank, responded. We had Idaho Housing Finance respond, and Lakeview were the 3 responses that we had. We plan to engage the Single Family Loan Servicing Committee that is made up of some of the board members as we get into some of the reviews and decision-making process, so that when we do make that decision and make that recommendation to the board, that we have full support from the Single Family Loan Servicing Committee. So that'll probably be done in the first quarter of 2020, as we have the holidays, and there's a lot of reviews that we need to get into, and we have some questions, some due diligence that we need to do before we get anywhere close to making a decision on this. This is a significant decision for the agency, and it'll put us, it certainly has impacts fiscally on our, for IHCDA, but also significantly impacts our ability to serve first-time home buyers and those who also can use our second or maybe buying a home for the second time. So But we'll be making that decision and making a recommendation to the board in the first quarter of 2020. So immediately following today's meeting, I know we have an audit committee meeting. So the audit committee, if we could just stick around for a little bit after this, I think we're going to meet upstairs to go over our audit. So we'll have that meeting following today's board meeting. Next board meeting is a little sooner. In December, it's December 19th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time here at IHCDA. The big piece of that budget, or the big piece of that meeting, will be proposing the 2020 budget for IHCDA, since we are on a calendar year. We will be making that presentation to the board in December on the 19th. So with that, I'll open it up if you have any questions or anything. So that was my
What about
update.
our housing task force?
Oh, the housing, we do have a housing, they're calling themselves a housing working group that's made up of multiple different stakeholders across our state that's kind of come together to really talk about and have an understanding of the affordable housing, or just the housing needs across our state. We've been convening this group now for a couple of months. What they would like to do is go out with an RFP the first of 2020 to solicit a firm that would engage on doing an evaluation of the housing needs in every county and for the state overall, taking a kind of a look back, but also looking forward, and then understanding where we are currently in terms of our housing stock and what those needs are. So that's the RFP. We have one drafted. We're going to reconvene here before the end of the year and review that RFP with the working group. And then they've asked IHCDA to be the fiscal agent and to take the lead on that, which we're happy to do. And so we plan to release that RFP the first quarter of 2020, have a third party under contract by the spring, and begin that work on that for them. And so that would be their first step. That's the first step that they want to do. So,
Good,
yeah.
thank you. Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We stand adjourned. Thank you.